Hi, this is Gary with MacMost Now. On today's episode, let's take a look back at 2012. So Apple released a lot of new hardware in 2012, but it also was a year with some controversy. Let's take a look. So everyone expected Apple to release a new iPad in 2012, but we didn't expect to have two generations of iPad. Both the third and fourth generation appeared this year only 6 months apart. The third generation had the new Retina display, the first Apple device larger than the iPhone that had one. And that was the new big feature, as well as a new processor. And the fourth generation really didn't change much except it used the new Lightning connector. And the Lightning connector replaced the old dock connector in all Apple iOS devices this year. What was also interesting about the iPad was the name. The first iPad was the iPad, the second was the iPad 2, but the third was not the iPad 3, but simply the new iPad, and officially called on the Apple site iPad 3rd generation. So Apple's dropping the idea of naming each generation of iPad, just calling everything the iPad, and tacking on a third generation, fourth generation there for official purposes like ordering from the website. But that wasn't it for the iPad. We also, of course, got the iPad mini, which is basically a smaller screened iPad without the Retina display, but otherwise has a lot of the same features as the full-size iPad, but with a much lower price. And the iPad mini was a big hit. Apple sold a lot of them, and it's really hard for some people to choose between the lighter, smaller iPad mini or the larger iPad with the faster processor and Retina display. Apple also brought the Retina display to the MacBook line with the new MacBook Pros. There's now a 13 and a 15-inch MacBook Pro with this Retina display, and that replaces the previous MacBook Pros, although they're still available for sale at a cheaper price. Another new thing about the new MacBook Pros is no optical drive. And this was the year that Apple got rid of the optical drive in both the MacBook Pros. It's already gone from the MacBook Airs, and now it's also gone from the new iMacs. The new iMacs are also a big hit, featuring a much thinner design, of course, since the optical drives are not there. They, however, don't have a Retina display yet. Maybe that's something we can look forward to next year. On the software side, Apple released macOS 10.8 Mountain Lion, which included new apps for reminders, notes, messages, and further integration with iCloud, Facebook, Twitter, and also new features like dictation and more AirPlay features. The biggest product Apple came out with this year is probably the iPhone 5. It was very anticipated and sold in huge numbers. The main differences between this one and previous generations are LTE connectivity, so for faster wireless connection, and also a taller screen with more pixels. To match the iPhone, Apple came out with a new iPod Touch, matches the screen size, but also they came out with a new iPod Nano, which is not an iOS device, and it comes in lots of different colors. It's a cheaper device that plays back music. It also now plays back video, returning video functionality to the iPod Nano line. It was missing in the previous generation. So what else happened in 2012? Well, at the beginning of the year there was a lot of focus on Apple's manufacturing in China. There were some reports, some good reports and some false ones about conditions in the factories in China used by Apple and other hardware manufacturers. And Apple took a lot of the focus off by mentioning how much of different computer parts and iPhone parts are manufactured here in the United States. And in addition, they also announced that starting next year, some Macs will be manufactured in the United States. 2012 also saw a lot of focus on the patent wars, patent disputes between Apple and other companies, with Apple settling with some companies like HTC over patent disputes and winning in court against other companies like Samsung. There's still a lot of appeals and court cases that are pending, so this will be continuing probably for the next several years. Apple tried to take some steps away from its competitor Google this year, starting with the removal of the YouTube app from iOS. And the YouTube app was a Google app that accessed YouTube videos. YouTube is owned by Google. Apple removed that, and Google responded by giving its own YouTube app with advanced functionality that you can download separately. It's not included with your iPhone. And then Apple moved away from using Google Maps data by creating its own Maps app that uses a new set of data owned by Apple. And this caused probably the biggest trouble for Apple all year. People didn't like the Apple Maps app. They preferred the Google Maps app. There were some differences like Street View versus Flyover, but also there were some inaccuracies found in the map data that Apple had that weren't present in the Google Maps data. Apple promises to come out with a new version of Google Maps with improved Maps data, so we'll see if they come through with that in 2013. In addition, though, having this new Maps app did bring us spoken directions, something that was missing from the old Google Maps app. And then Google responded just recently with coming out with its own independent Maps app, which also speaks feature spoken directions. So here at the end of 2012 we find ourselves with not one but two Maps apps, both with advanced functionality over what we had at the beginning of the year. So it's kind of a win for the user. So there's a look at Apple's year in review. Until next time, this is Gary with MacMost Now. Want more video tutorials? Just go to MacMost.com, click on the videos link at the top of the page, and then you can view all of the hundreds of MacMost videos by category.